September 9th, 1995, Elkhead Mountains, northwestern Colorado. The last anyone saw of Warren Mills was just after noon. He'd left a small diner in Craig, Colorado. Black coffee in a tin mug, 1 scrambled egg, dry toast. The waitress, Sandra Hines, remembered him because he always tipped exactly $2. Cash folded under the corner of the plate. Warren was 66, retired postal worker, widowed, lived alone in a cabin near Hayden with a yellow lab named Duke and a pair of vintage snowshoes hanging above his fireplace. On clear days, he hiked, mostly alone, mostly quiet. That Saturday, he drove his 1984 Chevy Blazer up County Road 78 toward the Deadman's Creek overlook, a narrow turnout perched above a winding ravine, 20 miles from the nearest ranger station. He parked there around 1 p.m. The truck was found 2 days later, empty. Warren's niece, Ellie Morgan, was the one who reported him missing. He called the Routt County Sheriff's Office late Monday morning after he failed to show up at a family picnic. "He never misses Sunday," she told the deputy, "and he always calls if he's going to be late." By Tuesday morning, SAR teams were combing the Elkhead Range on foot and horseback. Helicopters were grounded due to smoke from distant wildfires in Utah. Visibility was poor. They found tracks, boot prints about 200 yards south of the overlook. Then, nothing. No bag, no hat, no blood. Just broken brush and one faint sign, a slide mark down a steep slope, lost in the underbrush near Deadman's Creek. That's when the rumors started. The ravine had a reputation: old logging tales, settler stories, bears, steep terrain, broken legs, and worse. The creek ran narrow and deep through the base of the canyon, cold, slick, choked with deadfall. If someone fell in, finding them would be nearly impossible. By Friday, most assumed the worst, but not Dale Greer. Dale was a volunteer with the local SAR unit, 52, a former wildlife officer who'd spent half his life on the ridges west of Steamboat. He'd worked 24 search operations over the years. He didn't trust luck, and he didn't trust guesses. "You don't go missing like that," he told the incident commander. "Not Mills, not on a trail he's walked 50 times. He asked for one more sweep. Just him, on foot. No dogs, no radios. Just a topo map, a thermos, and his eyes. They granted him 6 hours. He started early, 6:15 a.m., from the trailhead. The morning was cold. Mist clung to the grass. The air smelled like pine smoke and stone. He moved slow, cutting southwest along a game trail he'd followed a dozen times before. And then, at exactly 7:42 a.m., he looked up. An eagle, bald, mature, circling, low, just over Deadman's Creek. It caught his eye because it didn't move off. It stayed, looping wide arcs over one tight stretch of canyon, again and again. Dale narrowed his eyes, then changed direction. Dale Greer wasn't the kind of man to follow eagles. He tracked prints, soil disturbances, movement patterns, but something about the way that bird circled, slow, deliberate, tugged at his instincts. It was too low for hunting, too consistent to ignore. He pressed east off the main trail, moving downhill. The terrain changed quickly, scrub brush giving way to shale and loose soil. The air grew heavier with smoke the farther he dropped, and the scent of old firewood lingered on every branch. He paused halfway down the ridge, pulled his field glasses from his jacket, and focused on the sky. There it was again, the eagle, circling one fixed point. He scanned below it. Thick tree cover, steep granite walls, and a dry wash leading down to Deadman's Creek, about 300 feet of rocky slope. No movement, no color, but there, just at the edge of the creek bed, a pale shape, flat, still. He lowered the binoculars. Then he moved. It took 40 minutes to reach the creek. He had to cut sideways to avoid the steepest parts, zigzagging between boulders and brush. Twice, he lost his footing. Once, he dropped to one knee hard enough to bite his tongue. He reached the bottom, sweating. The eagle was gone now, vanished somewhere beyond the trees. He scanned the area, and then he saw it. Not 20 feet ahead, slumped against a fallen pine, half covered in ash and soil, was Warren Mills, alive, but barely. Dale ran forward. Warren's eyes fluttered at the sound. His lips moved, dry and cracked. Dale dropped to his knees, pulled the canteen from his hip, and dribbled a few drops onto the man's lips. Warren blinked, then whispered, "I slipped." The story came slowly, pieced together later in the hospital. Warren had walked out to a familiar bluff just off the trail. The ground, loosened by drought and erosion, gave way beneath his feet. He tumbled 60 feet down the slope and landed hard against a dead tree, broke 2 ribs, dislocated his shoulder, lost his pack and radio. He crawled, barely, to the creek. He stayed there for 5 nights, drinking from the stream, drifting in and out of consciousness, unable to walk, yelling until his voice gave out. He thought he was going to die. He would have, but the eagle kept circling. Back at the SAR command tent, when Dale reported how he found Warren, someone laughed. "You followed a bird." "No," Dale said. "I followed a pattern." He didn't argue. He didn't need to, because Warren Mills was alive, and that was all that mattered. Warren Mills was airlifted to St. Mary's Medical Center in Grand Junction the same afternoon. 2 cracked ribs, a torn rotator cuff, and second-degree sunburn across his neck and arms. But he was alive, coherent, and deeply dehydrated. Doctors were amazed. So was his niece, Ellie. "I thought he was gone," she said, wiping her eyes in the hospital hallway. "We were already planning the memorial." Warren, in his quiet way, didn't speak much during those first days. Just nodded, rested, drank broth, stared out the window at the sky above the Grand Mesa. When a nurse asked if he remembered anything clearly from those nights in the canyon, he said one word: wings. Word spread quickly across Routt County. Local stations ran headlines like, "Eagle leads rescuer to missing man, saved by instinct and a bird." Some rolled their eyes, others didn't. In the search and rescue community, Dale Greer's name was already known, and while he refused interviews, he did make one comment to the Steamboat Pilot newspaper: "I wasn't chasing a miracle. I was chasing a movement. But if something bigger was at work, I'm not the one to explain it." Warren's recovery was slow but steady. By late October, he was walking with a cane. His shoulder was still stiff. Ellie drove him back to his cabin in Hayden. Duke, his lab, had been looked after by a neighbor. The dog nearly knocked him over wagging his tail. The first thing Warren did when he stepped inside, he looked at the mantel, where a framed black and white photo of his late wife, Margaret, stood beside a folded flag from his time in the army. He set down his cane and whispered, "I made it." The second thing he did, he wrote a letter. Not to the press, not to the sheriff's office, to Dale. 3 sentences, handwritten. "You didn't follow the rules. You followed something better. You gave me back a life I wasn't ready to lose." It hung on Dale's wall for the rest of his life, right next to a sketch of an eagle, drawn by Dale's granddaughter. The following spring, Warren Mills returned to Deadman's Creek. Not alone. Ellie drove, and Dale Greer met them at the trailhead with 2 thermoses of coffee and a folded topo map. They didn't plan to go far. Warren wasn't strong enough for the hike down, but he wanted to see the overlook again. He stood at the edge with his hand on Ellie's shoulder. Below, the trees had begun to green again. Tufts of early pine, ash-bleached stumps still lining the slope where the fall had happened. The creek was running clear with snowmelt, threading its way through stone like a whisper. They stood in silence for a long time. Then Warren said softly, "I don't know why he stayed up there. That bird." Dale didn't answer at first. Then he said, "Maybe he was waiting for someone to listen." A few months later, the Routt County SAR team installed a small wooden bench near the rim. Nothing fancy, just 3 planks and a view. On the back was a small brass plate that read, "In honor of those who wait and those who search. Deadman's Creek Recovery, September 1995. Locals began calling it Eagle's Rest. No one made it official. It just stuck. Over the years, hikers have reported seeing bald eagles circle the ravine, sometimes gliding alone on updrafts for hours. Maybe it's coincidence. Maybe not. But for those who know the story, the site always means something more. Warren lived quietly for another 12 years. Taught fly fishing workshops. Took up watercolor painting. He never went back to Deadman's Creek again. But he kept a hand-drawn eagle feather taped to the side of his fridge. Drawn by one of Ellie's children, and on the back, in faded pencil, he'd written, "The sky remembers." Sometimes, help doesn't come with sirens. Sometimes, it doesn't wear a uniform. Sometimes, it circles patiently overhead, waiting for you to look up. If this story stayed with you, if it made you think about the small miracles in ordinary places, please consider subscribing, sharing it, or leaving a comment, because some stories, especially the true ones, deserve to be heard. Thank you for listening to The Eagle Over Dead Man.